David earns about $72,000 a year. He has $6,200 saved, and in his mind, he thinks he's doing fairly well financially. But the truth is, he isn't. He's simply not in trouble yet. David carries $8,400 in credit card debt, pays $580 every month for his car, and his banking app politely tells him that his savings plan is on track. That message is the financial version of a doctor telling you your health looks fine right before the real tests begin. David isn't reckless with money, he isn't lazy either. He just lives in 2026, where the cost of living keeps climbing while salaries barely keep up. His rent absorbed his last raise before he ever had the chance to save it. Little by little, what used to be considered financial stability quietly turned into barely surviving. Today, what many people call doing okay is actually just a softer version of being broke. But here's the part David hasn't thought about. Researchers who study global security recently moved the doomsday clock to 85 seconds before midnight, the closest humanity has ever been to global catastrophe. The last major nuclear arms agreement between the United States and Russia expired earlier this year. For the first time in decades, there are no formal limits on either country's nuclear stockpile. If something truly serious happens in the world, David's $6,200 won't function as a safety net. It will barely function as a speed bump. My name is Thomas, and today we're going to talk about the number that actually protects you financially when the world stops functioning normally. But before we get into that number, we need to acknowledge something that most financial advice completely ignores. The world right now is more unstable than it has been in decades. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists has been measuring global nuclear risk since 1947. Their famous doomsday clock currently sits closer to midnight than at any point in nearly 80 years. Multiple geopolitical flashpoints are active at the same time. The Russia-Ukraine war still shows no clear resolution. Tensions between global powers are intensifying. Military encounters in the South China Sea are happening almost daily. Meanwhile, conflicts in the Middle East continue to threaten critical global shipping routes like the Strait of Hormuz, which directly affects oil prices and international trade. Perhaps even more concerning is how casual nuclear rhetoric has become. Discussions about tactical nuclear weapons used to be almost unthinkable in mainstream politics. In recent years, that taboo has eroded dramatically. Right now, the world is experiencing the highest number of active conflicts since the end of World War II. Global military spending broke records in 2024 and continued rising through 2025 at the fastest pace since the Cold War. Governments don't increase defense budgets like that when everything is calm. A survey conducted in early 2026 found that 46% of Americans believe a world war is likely within the next 5 years. Just 1 year earlier, that number was 38%. It's moving steadily in one direction. Now, to be clear, no one can predict whether a global war will actually happen, but nearly every major institution tracking geopolitical risk is sending the same warning signal. And someone like David, sitting with $6,200 in savings and a car payment, is completely unprepared for even a moderate version of that risk becoming reality. So what actually happens to your money during major crises? Let's look at real history. After World War I, Germany funded much of its war effort through massive borrowing. The aftermath triggered one of the most infamous financial disasters ever recorded, the Weimar hyperinflation between 1921 and 1923. Savings accounts that families had built over decades were wiped out in a matter of months. Teachers, factory workers, and civil servants watched their life savings become worthless. One diary from that period describes a man ordering coffee for 5,000 marks. By the time he finished and ordered another cup, the price had risen to 7,000 marks. At one point, people literally burned stacks of cash for warmth because the banknotes were cheaper than firewood. That's not an exaggeration, it actually happened. During World War II, similar patterns appeared across occupied Europe. In countries like France and the Netherlands, prices for everyday goods on the black market rose by 400 to 600%. Families sold jewelry, furniture, even farmland just to afford food for the week. Later, when Germany reformed its currency in 1948, the government effectively erased 93% of the money supply overnight. 10 old Reichsmarks suddenly became one new Deutschmark. If you had spent your entire life saving money in the bank, you woke up one morning to discover that 90% of your savings had vanished by government order. History shows the same pattern again and again. When major crises happen, currencies lose value, savings accounts collapse, financial systems freeze, and the people who manage to protect themselves financially tend to share three traits. They own real assets, they keep access to money outside the domestic banking system, and most importantly, they act before the window closes. That last part is critical because in almost every financial crisis, governments eventually impose capital controls. Banks freeze withdrawals, currencies are forcibly converted, assets are seized or restricted, and these policies almost always appear suddenly with very little warning. Sometimes the window to react lasts days, not months. History offers many examples. In 1933, the U.S. government ordered citizens to turn in their privately owned gold to the Federal Reserve within 28 days. After collecting it, the government immediately revalued gold, increasing its price dramatically, effectively transferring wealth away from citizens. In Argentina, in 2001, the government suddenly froze bank accounts nationwide. People couldn't withdraw their own savings. Shortly afterwards, deposits held in dollars were forcibly converted into pesos at deeply unfavorable exchange rates. In Cyprus in 2013, nearly half of large bank deposits were confiscated as part of a bailout agreement. Banks remained closed for nearly 2 weeks. Lebanon's banking crisis beginning in 2019 may be the most extreme modern example. Accounts were frozen without legal authority. Depositors lost access to billions of dollars. In some cases, people literally stormed banks with weapons to retrieve their own money for medical treatment. These events didn't happen in unstable, lawless regions. They happened in countries where citizens believed their banking systems were safe and reliable. Which brings us to the big question. Why do some analysts argue that $100,000 is the minimum financial threshold for real crisis preparedness? Why not $50,000 or $500,000? Because roughly $100,000 allows you to cover 4 critical needs simultaneously. First, survival expenses. Second, relocation costs if necessary. Third, protection against inflation or currency collapse. And fourth, capital to rebuild financially after the crisis passes. Average household expenses in the United States sit about $6,500 per month. During extreme cost-cutting, many families could survive about $3,000 per month. That means $36,000 covers 1 year of survival at a minimal lifestyle. But relocation can dramatically change the equation. Living in countries with lower costs, such as in parts of Eastern Europe or Latin America, might reduce expenses to $1,600 to $2,400 per month. Including flights, housing deposits, visas, and setup costs, living abroad for a full year could cost somewhere between $22,000 and $38,000. If someone starts with $100,000, they could potentially survive an entire year abroad and still retain $60,000 to $80,000. That remaining capital is extremely important because every major crisis in history has also created massive investment opportunities afterwards. During the 2008 financial crisis, U.S. housing prices fell by roughly 33%. The stock market dropped more than 50%. Investors who had cash available during the bottom of that crash saw extraordinary returns over the following decade. Major investment firms bought tens of thousands of homes at distressed prices and built enormous real estate portfolios. They didn't succeed because they were smarter. They succeeded because they had liquidity when everyone else was desperate. Someone with $50,000 might survive a crisis, but they would likely emerge financially empty. Someone with $100,000, on the other hand, still has the ability to rebuild. That difference is enormous. Right now, David's $6,200 savings doesn't provide survival. It provides a false sense of security. The goal isn't fear. The goal is options. the option to relocate if necessary, the option to wait out financial chaos, the option to invest when assets become cheap. Throughout history, people who acted before crises fully unfolded protected their wealth. Those who waited usually lost it. By the time panic spreads, the window to prepare is already closing. Building financial resilience before you need it isn't pessimism. It's simply understanding the numbers before reality forces you to.